Hello there! There's no argument in Amtgard that Wizard is a powerful class. It's usually considered in the top 2 or 3 classes, and I think for a good reason. But Wizard does have some intrinsic weaknesses that can be exploited by any good player. Let's talk about it. I'm Squire Callahan Ridgeborn, almost a Battlemaster, always a Wizard, and today I want to talk about how you can combat against different types of Wizards. There's a number of genres to wizarding, and I break them down into 3 categories. You'll find that for a lot of my content, I break things down into groups of 3. 3 is usually a good rememberable number. 5 sometimes if you are going for a bit longer of a list, but I think 3 is a good number. So the genres of wizard that I want to look at today are the verbal heavy, the spellball heavy, and the sword heavy wizards. And what do I mean by that? A verbal wizard is going to be a wizard that relies most of the time on their verbals to be doing any of their effects, right? If they're killing other players, it's usually with a kill combo or like Finger of Death. They're doing something to affect the other players with their words. And now a spellball heavy wizard, on the other hand, is going to be someone that is using spell balls to inflict states and wounds. Think sort of similar to the evoker, but it doesn't have to be an evoker. It's just someone who leans heavily on spell balls for effects. And then finally, the third genre is, of course, the sword-heavy wizard. This is a wizard who's using their magic to augment their stick skill, rather than their stick skill to augment their magic. And the difference here is, if the wizard's first instinct when you square up with them is to square up with their short sword, they're a sword-heavy wizard, rather than a verbal or a spellball-heavy wizard. And we're going to look at each of these categories, but before we do that, I want to talk about general wizard killing strategies, because all wizards are going to have certain things that they're going to be vulnerable to. So the first thing is magic. So magic is everyone's weakness in Amtgard, right? If you are trying to counter a wizard, there are a couple of things that are really particularly useful. So extension is really good because you can lock into that target and say, it doesn't matter if you run away, I'm still going to be able to hit you with this spell. Because most people cannot run 50 feet in the time it takes for you to rattle off a spell. Now, maybe they started off at like 45 feet and you were really pushing it. But if they were in normal verbal rage and you hit them with the extension, you're going to almost always hit. A hold person. If you can make someone stand still in our game, that often can be a death sentence all by itself. Making someone stand there and not do anything, very effective. Hard crowd control. Frozen, insubstantial, things that make it difficult for the wizard to release themselves or get help from other people is going to be a very good thing against most wizards. If they didn't buy an ambulant and you hit them with something that forces them to move in an unadvantageous way, they're not going to be able to get out of it before they have to take the steps, right? And once they have to take the steps, now they're cooked. They can't get out of it. They have to finish the crowd control. Frozen is obviously the best state to put a caster in because they're not doing anything. They definitely can't release themselves even if they have the ambulant. So putting a wizard into those states is really good. Finally, suppression. If you can suppress a wizard, you can take a lot of steam out of their steam engine or wind out of their sail or however you want to say it. If you can constantly be suppressing a wizard, that is going to demoralize them. It's going to make them less effective overall, and it's going to be difficult for them to maintain a field presence and be a danger to your team. If you are an archer, there are several things you can do to specifically counter a wizard. Sneak shot those arrows. If you can surprise them with the arrow, if they look at you and a wizard makes eye contact with you, your arrow is probably not going to have as much of an effect. It still can. I've definitely watched arrows come and try to block them and missed and gotten dead before. If you can hit them with a surprise shot, that can be very effective. It will be effective because they don't see it coming. You hit them, and now they're dead. The other thing you can do is if they are in like Gift of Air. This has happened to me on Lockhaven fields. I was playing Gift of Air Wizard, and I was trying to cast, and there were 2 archers that were focusing on me. And neither of them were actual archers. They were the archer class. They were whatever class that they were. And so they stood there, and Every time I got out of insubstantial from Gift of Air, because I'd come out of the insubstantial and I'd start casting, that hit me with another arrow. And so they were sort of riffle filing back and forth, so that every time I came out of the insub, they could force me back into the insub. Now, it wasn't as effective as killing me, but it kept me pinned down while they waited for the barbarian to make it over so the barbarian could actually hurt me. Thankfully, I was able to get out of that situation by using the other thing that Gift of Air can do, which is when you take the insub, you just go back to your base. But it was a very effective strategy for preventing me from casting in that quadrant of the battlefield for a good amount of time. Ultimately, if you are playing Archer, Phase Arrow is going to always work. Phase Arrow is just, you might as well just put your hands on your head as soon as you get targeted, because you're going to be dead. Finally, Melee. Melee fighters have the roughest go of it with Wizard, because Wizard is really built to punish melee fighters, put them in states and then kill them, or make them have leg day. There are a number of things that melee fighters can do, though. The biggest one is Relentless Pursuit. If you are a melee fighter and you are coming after a caster, that caster knows that every time they see you, they have to deal with you immediately, or you're going to chase them down and kill them. You can cause that wizard to be less effective by constantly worrying about you. And maybe you're not ever actually killing that caster, but by constantly harassing them and making them have to worry about you, you are taking that away from other members of your team. Another thing you can do is have some throwies. So a lot of classes get some form of thrown interaction, whether it be monk with the heavy thrown, or assassins with the light thrown, or javelins. Wizards don't get shields, so throwies can be very good against wizards. There's a guy at one of my local parks that has a bunch of small green throwies. They're about that size. They're squares with like orbs on the end, and he can flick them through. And I don't know how many times he's tagged me in the torso with those. Kage, if you're watching this, I still want to learn how you make those throwies, because they are wicked fast. Finally, flanking. If you can get around behind the wizard so they can't see you, and just run up and tag them on the back, that is a surefire way to get them. Make sure to roll them, though, because wizards oftentimes get enchantments. So, some specific ways of fighting specific types of wizards. So we already talked about verbal heavy wizards. These are wizards that are using either battle mage, or they're very reliant on their verbals. They might be playing generalist and primarily running through those verbals, trying to hit people with that. Biggest thing you can do on a verbal based wizard is stop them from moving. If you can hit them with a hold person, or a stopped effect from a pinning arrow or a rival caster, any way you can get them to stop moving is going to make them start dying. If you can leg them from any distance, that's going to make it harder for them to be effective, because the real strength of battle mage is the constant movement, being able to be on the move. You don't have to stop to start casting at someone. You're just always shuffling around, getting better optimum positions, and taking that away from them really negates the benefit that they gain, and now all they're left with is the negative side, not having any spell balls. So that's specifically for battle mage, but even if they're just a generalist that is very verbal heavy, preventing movement will prevent them from getting a better field position. Figuring out what schools they are. There are a bunch of different ways to get different kinds of immunities, right? Whether it's scout with their blessings, or druids with their lycanthropies, there are ways to get enchantments that will give you immunities to different schools of magic. Paladins can give out pro command or pro death on a per life basis. So figuring out what schools the wizard is relying heavily on can help you get through their guard. The pincer maneuver. This is something I've taught my kids, and I am trying to get them to get better at. If you have two people, and they're coming at a wizard, the wizard can only cast at one of them at a time, right? Maybe they have the short sword and they can engage with this one over here while they're casting over here, but now they're split. Their attention is split, and you're going to have better chances to take them out. And the same thing if you just do a headlong rush. You don't always have to go for the fancy pincer maneuver. Straight up charge them. They're probably going to run away. The deep flank. So if you get really into the back line and start working your way forward, you can take out wizards easily when they're not looking for you. And then finally, archery is very strong against verbal-based wizards, because Verbal-based wizards are usually on the move, so they're not going to be camped behind a armored fighter the whole time. There's going to be good opportunities of them moving when they're going to be vulnerable to that archery, more so than the other genres of wizardry. So, spellball heavy wizards. So, spellball heavy wizards rely on spell balls. Whoa! So, your spell ball is, charging them, chucking them. Maybe they're playing Elemental Barrage, and they're going to be reliant on them. So, the big thing about spell balls is they can only have one active at a time, and even if you suppress them, it doesn't turn off the spell ball. So if I've got a spell ball in hand and you come up and suppress me, I can still hit you with it, right? So the biggest thing for spell ball wizards is to outweight the active spell ball. If you are waiting to rush the wizard, just like rushing an archer, you wait until they shoot, and then when they start to get set up for the next shot, that's when you run in and you start hitting them with your sword, because you've got them at that point. They're not ready for that fight. Another thing you can try to do is bait and dodge the spell ball. If you come up with a shield, and I've got an ice ball in hand, I'm like, ooh, that's a juicy looking shield. I'm going to try to hit that shield. You can gently toss that shield in front of you to block the spell ball, and it'll fall on the ground, and nothing will happen because you weren't holding it. Alternatively, you could try to dodge out of the way. Juking is a great tactic for spell balls if they're not expecting you to do that. Another thing you can do is greater release. So if they are playing Evoker and they are in Elemental Barrage, a simple greater release takes them out of Elemental Barrage. In general, if someone is playing Elemental Barrage, it is because they are trying to be very, very fast with the spellball magic. And by being very fast, that is their effectiveness. Now, if you can take them out of Elemental Barrage, suddenly they're back down and now they have a giant pile of spell balls that are each, charged 3 times. Even the Force Bolt is going to be longer than just saying Force Bolt. And maybe they have another one on their list. Maybe you have another greater release on your list. Finally, you could tank the state, This is something that Gore talked about during his Paragon interview, was when you have wizards that are doing shenaniganry coming after you, or any class really, if you just tank the state, that a lot of times is all they have, right? A Elemental Barrage wizard who hits you with the ice ball does not have the spells to deal with the rest of you, right? They don't have the shatters, they don't have the drag belows, they just have more spell balls. Sort of like the triangle problem, right? Again, bring a friend. They cannot throw 2 spell balls at a time, so if they hit you with one, they didn't hit your friend, now your friend's got the kill. Or maybe it's vice versa. And then, if they're not in Elemental Barrage, when they are charging their spell balls, they have to stand still. And that will give you a 5 to 15 second window where you could try to hit them with an arrow from pretty good range. So be aware of that. A lot of times when they stand, they'll get into like a ready stance and they'll be charging the spell ball back here. And you can try to hit that shoulder or into this whole arm area. It presents a very broad target. So, sword heavy wizards. These are wizards who are really good with their stick skill, and they are primarily here to hit you with that stick, and the magic is there to back them up, right? There's sort of a trope in my head of the sword knight that plays wizard because they love single short, and the magic is just there to help them not have to deal with the magic, right? So if you're very reliant on your sword as a wizard, there are a number of ways you can deal with that. Number one is just to outstick them. If you're better at stick than the stick wizard, you got it, right? If you have more armor than them, that can be really beneficial because then they're going to have to chew through that armor before they can get to you. But be on the lookout for magic armor. Be aware that they're going to try to mess with your equipment. A lot of times when you have a sword-based wizard, what they're going to do is they're going to show up and they're going to try to either mess with your equipment or they're going to mess with your mobility. They're going to try to lock you down in some way so that they have the advantage in the sword fight that's coming through. Finally, you can try to break their sword. A lot of people don't bring spare weapons onto the battlefield, and this is a weird thing, especially if you're like a sword-based wizard. Bring more than one sword, but even if they have more than one sword, if you can break their sword with arrows or spell balls or verbals or whatever you're using to break swords, if you can break their sword, that is going to slow them down as they either switch swords or swift mend it. And how many of those can they have per life? Well, they can only have 2 swifts. They have, 30 men's perhaps, but did they really buy 30 men's? Probably not. So you can try to chew through those to reduce their active attacking competence. Thank you for watching this video about how to defeat wizards. I hope it was very educational for you and you have some insight on the ways that I personally have been murdered over and over and over again on the battlefield, and hopefully it can help you deal with your local wizard problem, or maybe even it'll help you deal with me. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any questions, I love to try to get those down in the comments section. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.